welcome, Jennifer, to another edition of Founders Talks. Such a pleasure to have you. Founders Talks I really like Founders Talks because Founder Talks are a way for us as, a rally to be able to showcase that we're an international hub, that we should be an international hub for social entrepreneurship. And wherever you are in that journey, whether you're, especially in the early stages, that Orlando has all the resources and talents to help those entrepreneurs achieve their missions, right? And so having you on here is one of the highlights. We're highlighting some of Orlando's finest, and you're obviously included in that category. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored.
So before we kind of just jump into the meat of the conversation, which is kind of give us the story of you, like what's the story of you, like backdrop?
Okay, so I would say the story of me is pretty. I was a little bit of an odd kid. I'll start off there. So, and I'll say that because when I was 4, I started my first venture, and it was really like not in any type of serious way, but it was more so. So my parents brought me an easy bake oven, and like most kids, I went through the entire supply, and then I asked my parents, "Can I get more?" And they said, "No, you have to wait." Blah blah blah. Right. So then I decided, okay, so how can I make sure that I have more supply, get it, continue? So it kind of got my mind thinking about, well, why my parents talking about money and things like that. So then I decided, and I should preface this with, my dad is an entrepreneur, right? So having my dad there as an entrepreneur, obviously knowing that exists also helped. And so I decided,
really quickly, did you run out of supply because you ate all your supply?
Yes. I mean, me and my assistant, which was my little brother at the time, and so he's 2 years younger than me. So
yeah.
So at first it wasn't a business. We just ate. Yeah.
Biggie and the 10 Crack Commandments gave very specific instructions about eating your own supplies. So, so that's good. So you decided not to eat your own supply and figure out a way to monetize it, right?
Yeah, so I figured out a way to monetize it, and so then I would sell it in my grandma's neighborhood. But it was to be able to sustain that I could eat some of my supply, just not all of it, and then be able to sell it so that I could continue to have the business. And so that was my first inkling of having a business. And it went from like starting off with doing it to like every Saturday I was in my grandma's neighborhood because she was around like older people that thought I was cute and they would give me lots of money. And so like buying my mom Christmas gifts and so things like that. So it taught me on a low scale, like supply, demand. It also taught me because I saved all that money. And so I built that case of being a saver. So I would say I was a little bit like, and so I've always been that kid that had some type of side hustle.
Yeah.
So starting from there to whether it's selling candy, trying to sell Pokemon cards, selling business cards, doing PowerPoint templates for my dad's business partners, so all different types of things. And so that was always me. I was always focused on that and focused in school. Yeah. And so from a background perspective, I was born and raised in Orlando. I left for a couple of years when I went to college, and I worked for the state, which was very interesting because I realized I could not do governmental work because there's too much red tape, and I don't always like to color inside the lines. I like sometimes to do, like, I'll follow the rules if the rules make sense. If the rules don't make sense, then I may not follow the rules.
Or make sense for you.
Just in general, if they don't make sense. So like when I worked in government, there were times where service, like we could for the same cost provide better service, but everyone's like, well, what's the point in exerting the energy? Well, to me, that doesn't make sense. The point is so that you can create better service and you can create more loyalty among your consumers. But in governmental work, you don't really see it as that. Like we take for granted the customer because they're kind of in that value chain and they have to be there.
Yeah.
So
I think that's really interesting when you say, not to derail you from because we want to hear the rest of your story. It's like how when you start to talk, like there's so many common themes I hear, even in my own life, right? Like being a kid and having a hustle, right? For you is easy bake the stuff that comes out of that. For me, it was like, I remember like we opened up a zoo, like, so we went around and caught animals, and then we put them in like little boxes and aquariums, and like we charged the kids money to come in our backyard to go see the animals, and then we did something as obnoxious as like chocolate covered ants. I'm not sure where we read that from. We tried to sell chocolate covered ants. Parents got mad and demanded that we give kids their money back, but we're like, they ate the product. But there's a sense of hustle that is just innately, I think, a part of, like, it's interesting as entrepreneurs talk, like we hear that in a lot of stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very true, because it's just that testing, like you said. So I've done a lot of different things in order to try to make money and test, but I think all of that helps us as we continue to refine, even with the chocolate ants, our product and our offerings.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. All right, so you went into government work, and
so I went into government work, was not as fulfilled as I wanted to be in the government work. So then I decided to get my MBA, go back to school, and went to Crummer, got a wealth of experience. And at the same time, in between that, I had interned with Tupperware before. I really liked it, but I decided to stay in South Florida, do the governmental work. And so when I came back, I ended up coming back into working with Tupperware. And so that's really been like, I've been there for a while in my corporate career, and I've went from finance. And so I to give a background, my degrees are in both finance and marketing. So I'm both analytical and I'm creative. And the reason is because at first I just wanted to understand like the entire gamut of the business. And also as a finance person, I said, when the marketing people talk, I want to be able to understand them. Then I realized I liked marketing a lot better than finance, but there are a lot more finance jobs. Right. So I started on the finance side and then moved into business intelligence, marketing operations, and then into strategy. So I would say just a lot of, for me, it's good because it's that strong number side, but also still having that creativity.
Yeah, that's cool. So obviously you had this journey that started with an easy bake oven. Today you're what is it? Are you the CEO of Tupperware or?
No.
No. I was like, that's one heck of a story, right? But you're very important at Tupperware. You do marketing, and then you also have your own venture, which I want to talk about. What was it? So even though you went through government, you went to corporate America, you still have these touch points where you're either stepping into entrepreneurism, either as an operator of something or in coaching people. So has that always, like, you feel like entrepreneurship is a natural thing for you? Is this part of, or that's something that you just grew to love over time, or you just always felt like, I want to work with startups and maybe potentially even start my own business?
I think it was a little bit of both, because at first for me, I didn't necessarily see myself as an entrepreneur. I saw it more as, I've always been, for some reason, that person that people turn to and they're like, Jen, how do we solve this? And then I'm just like, why are they looking at me? Like early in my career, like I didn't know why are they asking me? And then all the other stuff that I was doing, I never really saw it as entrepreneurship, but instead I just saw it as me testing different things, me trying to solve a problem. And that initial one, the problem was, how can I eat my product but still continue to be able to have more product or whatever? So I needed to create a business. And some of the other ones, it was, how can I buy a Mother's Day gift for my mom? And then how can I save up so that I can get a bike? How can I save up to get a car? And how can I save up for college? So all of it was just different things. So really just trying to solve a need for myself and not really seeing it as being an entrepreneur, because my dad was an entrepreneur and he has this big organization and it's well structured. And so not really thinking about it that way. So I just kind of found myself in those spaces where I was helping people and I was in the entrepreneur space. But I would say from a career perspective, I think it's always been about more of the social side and the purpose side. So even when I was working for the government, the reason why I took that job is because I wanted to do good and I wanted to help on the Department of Transportation side. So how can we help streamline it for our constituents? And then working for Tupperware, because Tupperware really helps to create economic empowerment for women. It's being a part of an organization that's helping to do that. And what can my role be in helping to do that? And with Purpose Project and working with entrepreneurs and businesses, it's really all about the impact. For me, I think it's been more than really seeing myself as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's really, so yeah, it is the purpose driven work, which then leads me to, then explains why you not only came to Rally and participate in Rally as a mentor and as a rally maker, but then also the other work that you do. Which came first? Was it Rally, or were you already doing the other work?
I would say I was already working with people, but not in a very organized way. I think Rally helped me then understand the right process to go about doing it. If
Oh,
that's right,
that's
like in
interesting.
learning from what you and Ben were doing, and not on the Purpose Project side, just on the like mentoring,
Yeah.
is that piece of it. So I think it actually helped me hone in my skills to be more effective.
So the business that I keep alluding to, talk to us about that business, because it's really centered around purpose. It not only is designed to help you achieve impact, and then also as a business, but then also it helps other people get their impact too. So let's talk to us a little bit about that.
So with Purpose Project, so we're in our second year, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's we try to help people understand where their purpose is, and so a part of that work is having people understand what their value set is, what's important to them. More importantly, also, is what are you good at? So bridging all these different things to understand what is your actual purpose. And so a part of it, a lot of times, it's helping people get to that point, because a lot of the people that we work with on Purpose Project early on, a lot of times there's a lack of confidence around what they can do. And even sometimes there's a spot where they can't even see their skill set. They're like, I'm not good at anything. I don't have any passions. I have zero hobbies. And then we have some people that truly do understand the value that they add, but they don't know how to bridge the gap from here's what I'm passionate about, here's what I want to do, but how to actually turn that into a career or a business. And so that's what we help them do. So then we take them from that first piece, if they don't know their purpose, and then also to that second piece of really being able to pursue their purpose by creating systems. And a lot of it is not really complex. It's about getting people to start to do the work and not overcomplicate the process.
Yeah. I want to talk about this purpose thing. Obviously,
Mhm.
the purpose is an important thing. Like, why is it? I mean, why is it important individually? Let's just start with why is it important individually, and then how does that translate to why is it important for individuals who are starting stuff?
So I would say, what you're asking, why is it important individually for people to
Understand like their purpose. Like, why does it matter? Like, yeah, because apparently you're saying, well, maybe you're not saying this. I could be putting words in your mouth, but there are people operating in a less optimum way in the
Mhm.
world because they don't understand what their purpose is, right?
Yeah,
I would
absolutely.
say that would also extend to organizations or companies, right? Especially early stage companies. And so purpose, understanding clearly what that purpose is important. So so explain that for us.
Yeah, I think it's because it's exactly what you're saying. It's understanding why you exist in the world. And when you don't understand your purpose, whether you are a business or a person, how you're not going to be really effective in what you're doing. So for me, it's like if I'm outside of my purpose in where I'm working or what I'm doing, and sometimes I am outside of that. And and just to clarify, I don't mean outside your comfort zone, because you should definitely try to be outside your comfort zone often and early.
Right.
But more so when you're working outside of where your core skills are and where you can continue to grow, then you're not going to be as effective. And so that's really the belief there. And I think it's really a little bit different than today, where we're kind of just saying do what makes money. And I would say everyone that's on this call is not a part of that anyways, because everyone here is trying to do what they have a passion for. They're trying to solve a good and solve a need. So we're already in like minds, but getting away from that culture of doing what brings you money, because money won't bring you happiness, but living a life of fulfillment will. And you're fulfilled when you're using your talents and your skills to optimize and maximize them.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way of
Yeah.
talking about it.
Yeah, we use that social lean canvas, and the very start of that is the purpose and then impact. So like the traditional lean canvas it starts off with problem or customer, right?
Mhm.
In the one that we use at Rally, it starts off with purpose and impact, and I always hand that off to Ben because I think he's he's very good at articulating why purpose and stuff matters and impact matters, because his work has always been driven primarily from through that, and it feels like he just grasped it earlier sooner versus later. But yeah, like we always start there with the purpose statement.
I think that purpose is, especially with entrepreneurs, like you mentioned this problem solving, but I really liked how you talked about the science and the art, the finance and the marketing, because I think that entrepreneurs are more than problem solvers, right? If you needed money to go to school or money to get supply, you didn't just get a job, you made something new in order to make that money. So there's like this science and this creative, that they're like building new things in order to address problems. And most of the social entrepreneurs that we interact with have an intuitive sense of the impact they want to make in the world, and have begun developing a product that they believe will make that impact in the world, but haven't always made explicit that purpose that is intuitively driving them. And there's a missed opportunity when they do that, because if your purpose is not explicit, it's harder to recruit collaborators or customers, right? Because people can't come with you on a purpose that they may be compelled or inspired by if you can't say it clearly to them. Then they have to intuit with you and find your purpose hidden in your product or your marketing. Whereas if you're able to go through the effort to make it very explicit, then you can build collaborators and customers. And also it helps you build a better creative solution. It helps you solve the problem better if you're able to take the time to make explicit what purpose you're on. And so I think that could probably be true, Jennifer, for individuals as well. I found it for myself, is like when I took the time to make my personal purpose explicit, it gave me way more energy in driving individually on the solutions that I was looking for.
And it somewhat reminds me of what I always say, which is don't fall in love with your solution. So the more in line you are with my purpose, like what is my higher intent? Why am I doing this? And what problem am I trying to solve, or whether it's a business, what problem am I trying to solve? If it's a person, what problem do I exist to solve, or why do I exist? Then you're able to adapt more quickly. But when you get tied into the solution, so let's say I believe I want to solve food waste, right? And then I get tied into just doing it one particular way, then you get caught into that solution. And so you're not able to adapt and make those adjustments based on what the customer is telling you and what their wants and needs are. And that ends up being a limitation. So I do think part of it is when you understand that higher intent, then you're not falling in love with the solution, but instead you're falling in love with solving that problem, with reaching that purpose. And then everything else is, how do I get there? How do I build on it?
Yeah, that's interesting you talk about that, because I was in a conversation. Sometimes it feels very cold because I describe the things I do as tools, right? And it goes into what you're saying. It's like there was a point where I used to fall in love with the tool, right? Like I'm doing this thing, and so it became very hard for me to, if it wasn't necessarily working out, to detach myself from it. But then when I really started governing my life by an overall purpose and saying, here's ultimately what I'm trying to do to help people find and fearlessly move into the power of their unique story, then the question became, well, what do I use? What tool sets do I use to get there? And so for me, it's Rally, it's the Conduit. Um, it was Learn Jelly and some of the educational work. But then recently I made a pivot because I decided that the education component, although I'll continue to be passively helpful in that area, it wasn't. I had to sit it down, right? And now I'm leaning more in the areas of dealing with conversations around racism, poverty, and aggression, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like they're barriers that help people fearlessly move into the power of their unique story, right? And so it's interesting to hear you say that, because to me it's a basket of things that I have, and because I'm so clear on what my overall purpose is, I then the question is, what tools are best for me and most efficient for me in order to get there, right? What do I use to get there? So it's really cool to hear you talk through that. So I mean, like but I find that it's hard to get there, right? Especially individually, and then as a business. So like, in your expertise in terms of individuals, like how do they arrive to the place where they can understand their purpose, or what does that process look like? And then I want to talk about how does that then, do you see that potentially influences the kinds and types of businesses they go into? And then what if somebody, well, okay, I'll keep this, because the first two are very deep questions. So like what is, how do people, what is your recommendation on how people get there individually if they're still trying to understand and clarify what the purpose is?
So I would say individually, and some of this would be applicable to businesses as well. I think it goes back to driven, and I'll say this to make it more business, but I think the first part is doing that self-discovery piece. And what I mean by that is really understanding, even for the entrepreneurs beyond the business, but doing that self-discovery of what innate in each of us has, innate talents, gifts, skills, abilities. So it's doing a self-audit of what are those things that you have, what are those unique things, and we all have them. And then also reflecting on what are the passions. So what passions do you have? And so I would say for me, and I should say this, like all of it is somewhat based in my faith. So I believe that the passions that are placed inside of you were placed there for a reason. And so we try to help people, and I say this a lot, bring out what's already inside of them. And so it's that self-discovery piece first, kind of doing the audit. So if you're a business, and I'm saying you're an entrepreneur, it's looking at where can you affect change and what are you passionate about. And so when you combine those two things of where you actually can affect change, where your passion lies, and then a bit of affirmation. So part of what we have people do is do surveys with other people to understand where do they see your passions, where do they see your skills, so you get a little bit of that outside opinion. And that would be similar to if you're a business, if you survey your core consumers. And so in this case, for me, my core consumer would be my spouse, my business partner, different people. And you're kind of having them do a survey or an audit on you to kind of say, and where are you effective, where are you not effective, and things like that. So that's the first piece of the work, is that self-discovery piece. And then once you get into that self-discovery piece and you expand a little bit further in there, then it's really building on those core skills. So how can you build on it? And so what we do is we surround them with the community of people that can really help them build on those skills, in addition to me and my partner. And so I would say for businesses, it's also when you come up and you figure out, hey, this is what I do, and you have a business idea, the first thing is business partners. Who are you going to surround yourself with? What does your advisory team look like? And how do you build that bit strength? Because what we see, even in Purpose Project, the difference between the people that can successfully move into their purpose or not really has to do with the resources and the wisdom that they have around them. Do they have people that support them and are brought into their vision and brought into their dream? And so for you, do you have the people on your team that are brought into it? And then not being afraid to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And so it's like we try to get them to kind of see outside of that, and not people that are just going to say yes and I believe, but people that are going to challenge you, who are going to question you. It's still in a supportive way. And so that's going to stretch you to be a little bit better. And then from there, it's creating the plans to actually enact it.
Yeah, that's so. Man, so
Yeah,
so what's
there's
interesting. Go. So what's interesting is that it feels like there's so much riding on really understanding your drivers individually, and then how that has an impact on you as you move into your entrepreneurial journey. So it will like so you can start something that can be completely unaligned with your own internal motivations or the things you care about and outside of your gifts and talents. And we've seen the battlefield is littered with organizations like that. And oftentimes what I see is founders who are in areas like that, they seem to never really be able to hit it the way or get their stride the way that they should, because they're outside of their purpose or their gifts or expertise. And then the other thing is when things get hard, which inevitably they do, they tend to um, fall to the side faster, right? Or fall to the sword faster. But then you just talked about how even being able to understand what it is and how it impacts the people you surround yourself by, right?
mm,
Um, so it's like you if you're not able to clearly articulate it, like how do you build a team if you can't clearly articulate your purpose?
but I would say that's part of it, right? So if you can't clearly articulate your purpose, then I think it's in that discovery piece is first understanding what other people see in you, what you see in yourself, and then also from our perspective, what God has put in you. So
Right.
it's kind of looking at the intersection of all those things. But you said it 100% right, going back to your comment about the passion piece, because realistically, when things get tough, when there's always going to be trials, there's always going to be adversity. And even for everyone here, in order to build an organization, there's a lot of sleepless nights, there's a lot that goes into it. And so you're only going to be able to weather that storm if there's a true passion there. And so one of the first questions we ask people is, what would you do if you didn't make any money? And also, what would you stay like up late doing, working on, irregardless of pay or whatever? Like, what would keep you from, like, you could sit in front of a screen for hours, or you could do it for hours and you wouldn't think about eating, drinking, any of those things, to kind of get to some of these core questions. So we do ask them. A lot of it is us asking them deeper questions and then going deeper and deeper and deeper
Mhm.
to help them reveal it. Because if you just ask someone, and we know this from experience, like, what's your purpose? They don't know most of the
Right.
time. But it's really asking those questions that help kind of peel off those layers and get them deeper and deeper and deeper. And so as we get into this, at some point we actually have them like close their eyes and think about where it is that they're trying, that trajectory, or where they're trying to go. What does it look like? And then also, even sometimes we go, and it may sound crazy, but it's even going to the point where sometimes we have them draw out, like, okay, if you could do anything, like, what's that dream? Draw it out. And there's more to it than that, but actually having them draw it out and put it on paper and envision it. Because a lot of times it's people are afraid to think that big. People are afraid to. So some of it that we get past is thinking like, well, I'm only one person. I can't really do beyond, especially when we're dealing with people who have been in the corporate world or the corporate academic environment for a long time.
Mhm.
They're more hesitant to step out and to say that they can do something that's bigger and greater. With entrepreneurs, we see them more ready to kind of make that leap and say like, okay, I can do it, because there's already this kind of like belief in, I'm going to be able to build it. And so it's
Right.
bridging both depending on the personality type.
Yeah. Um, so what it so you've obviously gone through this journey yourself. You've worked with entrepreneurs in the past. You're building your own startup, right? I mean, that's what it is. It's early stage. Well, maybe
Mhm.
you're past early stage because you have customers and stuff and repeatability. Um, what like if you can give us it would be nice if you give us three. I don't want to put you on the spot, but and we want and walk us through each one. But if you can give us three nuggets of wisdom that entrepreneurs can take away from this call, and our fellows can take away from this call, um, what would be the first nugget of wisdom in as it relates to like purpose and building business or entrepreneurship, like or whatever it is that you want to talk about? What would be that first nugget?
So I would say the first nugget, and I probably have a couple. The first one is as you're looking at your business and you're early on, I would say challenging your assumptions and periodically testing your assumptions. So you may go in saying, I want to do this, and this is the solution in order to do it, right? Whatever. And so I said, for you guys, you're trying to solve something and you're looking for that impact. But I would say challenge your assumptions around your consumer, around the gatekeepers, around the various parties that are part of it. Because a lot of times when I find, and this is in my corporate career and both with Purpose Project, and I can add a little bit of color here, what we thought was true may not always be true. And even for the customer, as the customer evolves, what could have been true in the past may not be true today. And so I'll give an example. When I was in Tupperware and I was working in business intelligence, we had a time where we were getting rapid recruits. And so recruits are new people that join our sales force that are making money. And so we had a lot of recruits, and we saw that our average sales per order was going down. And so everyone was like, oh, that's because we have a bunch of recruits. Recruits don't, because they're new and they don't know, they don't make as much money as our seasoned consultants, right? And so that's just what people said. And so for 2 months, people said that. And then I thought, well, let me actually check to make sure that's correct. And so what we found is that actually our recruits were more productive than the people that had been inside the business. And because we actually looked and so I would say looking and diving into that insights and asking. And so when we asked them, what we found out was that the other people that started off as recruits and now they were managers were having a hard time managing the new recruits and managing their business. And so they actually needed help in that. And so we wouldn't have gotten to that point where we're like, okay, how can we give you tools and skills to help you in really understanding what that consumer need was if we had just went with the assumptions that, okay, we validated this with one group and we're just going to keep on going off of the assumption forever. So I would say I think the first piece is really to challenge your assumptions, constantly challenge your assumptions and ask yourself, especially if they're personal assumptions, this is what my consumer is saying? Is this still true about the marketplace, especially with COVID? The marketplace is changing a lot. So I'd say that is a big one.
Okay.
I love that because it talks about how you're never done with this stuff. So a lot of times we might do customer discovery at the beginning and get some validation on our product and market and then run. And especially I think like early stage entrepreneurs that are building new things, the idea of going back over ground that they've been over before is less exciting. So coming back to ask questions again to people that we've already sold. And it makes me think of what you said earlier in the conversation about the importance of having the right people around you. So I know enough about myself to know that ongoing customer discovery is like aggravating and not something I want to make new stuff. I don't want to go back and figure out what's wrong with stuff I already made. But I'm learning to put people on the team with me that like always cleaning up the system and making sure it's working well. And so I like that you bring that out, and I just want to double tap on it just for a minute that
Double tap.
double tap on that idea that you don't these are good things to think about, but also think about what you're good at and how you could build a complementary team. So that our tendency sometimes is to fill our team with people that look just like us, but you want people that look different from you.
I really like because Jennifer really aligns with what you were saying. It's like doing that self audit and understanding your limitations and what your gifts and talents are. Unless you understand that stuff clearly and you're honest about it, right? Like this is what I'm not good at, right? Like and not try to like overcompensate. Like I don't have to be good at everything, right? Like I'm okay with not being awesome. completely awesome. But I'm okay, but I'm cool with being awesome in certain areas, and I just need to understand that. And so, based on what you were saying, it's like understanding those limitations, those gifts, those talents. Doing that self audit will then allow you to do the thing where you're able to ask questions and don't make assumptions, and then to be able to surround yourself by to be vulnerable in those conversations, and to surround yourself by people or solutions or things that will solve those vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
that will allow you to go on. All right, so nugget two.
So
Nugget two.
nugget two, I would say kind of goes along with that. And so all of this is just about self-discovery, continuing to learn and continue, I would say, continue to being able to adapt and iterate. So I'd say nugget two is the fact that if you're afraid to, like, not being afraid to fail. So I feel like fail is an integral part of the search, especially on the startup phase. And so you're going to fail in certain aspects of it. You may think the customer wants this, get out there, they don't want it. But I would say leverage the fact that when you're a startup, you can make changes. You can talk directly to your consumer. You can make those adjustments and those pivots necessary. So I would say don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to make the changes, because this is the phase where you actually can make the changes, where you can adapt. This is the point where you can actually get on the phone and talk to every single customer. And so even for me in my business, because we have customers, but we set up calls with our customer to understand, and especially even if we got the feedback, they loved it, it was great. We set up calls with them to understand, what can we do better? What else are you looking for? What other confusion is there? And I would say, so also doing a little bit more of that work, because once you scale and you get bigger, it's harder to do than I would say on the corporate side. We couldn't possibly talk to most of our consumers or customers, any of those things. And so what you're getting is a slice of what it is. But a lot of times when we have those conversations, the people that are already in our community give us a lot of new ideas. And so when we're coming out with the next product, it's not the next product that me and Christina, my business partner, think will work. It's the next product that our consumers told us they wanted, because we've done the work of talking to them and doing it. So I would say, don't be afraid to also, with that, throw some things out there and see if it sticks. So we do sometimes just throw things out there to see, is this of interest? Is it not? And sometimes we do that through surveys. Sometimes we do it through creating a demo, so that we can demo it and test the way that people are reacting to it before we actually build. And so I think a lot of times people like to build a product, then they want to demo the product, then sell the product. We try to demo it, can we sell it, and then we can build it.
Yeah, that's a very important. I really so there's many things I like about what you just said. First, I will say that the work that to challenge assumptions, and to the second thing you said, which is oh my God, my brain is free because there's so much stuff. Challenge assumptions, and then to
Don't be afraid to fail.
don't be afraid to fail. Yes, exactly. Like those are makes an entrepreneur feel very vulnerable, those activities, because you're like, I have to test whether or not something I believe is true or not. And there's a lot riding on it. And if I fail, I got to put this thing out here. And so that means that people potentially, they will not like it, and I will fail. And what does that mean? Right. And so there's some vulnerability that happens there. And the reason why I feel like this is important, especially the last thing you said, is because I remember the first product that I built was called tech product I built was called GoToTie. So it was a location-based text messaging service that allowed people to have these conversations within the location. And I remember we spent probably we made an assumption that what people would want, that people would be interested in these conversations. And we came up with several use cases. And we probably spent about 40 grand trying to building that platform. Just not only ourselves, but then services attached and all the things that we try to do. And I remember one of the biggest lessons I took away from that, because ultimately the product that it ultimately became, was accepted was around a completely different thing. I'm gonna say I could have saved myself a lot of time and headaches if I would have just tested it in a very low cost way. Um, and so then when I moved into learn jelly, I remember like just I was kind of testing the concept of it. And I remember like the way that I ended up testing it was because I learned those lessons. Like, I don't want to build this thing and spend all this time and money. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put it out there, and what I think is the form and it's imperfect, and the imperfect meaning that it wasn't even built. But the question was, could I get people to buy it, right? Could I talk about it and get people to buy it? And can I build some low cost system that where I can demo it to people? And that was a much better experience because I was able to learn exactly how people I needed to talk about it and how I needed to showcase it to people. And then it ultimately informed me on what did I need to build, right? So what you said was really perfect and resonated with me a lot.
Well, and I'm going to say again, like most entrepreneurs I've found like the building thing, and they like running to a solution in their head and developing the product that solves the problem. But this piece earlier on about testing and pre-selling or surveying is really important. And so it may be a space where you need to find a strategic partner, maybe where you need to find someone who really likes that work, but don't skip it because it's not the work that you like to do. Because it's going to end up costing you more, and your time and capabilities are too valuable to spend them on something that's not going to work. You might as well find out sooner so you've got more time to spend on something that will work, even if you've got to get someone else to do that part for you.
Now, Jennifer, you probably have another nugget of wisdom, but before I move forward, like because a lot of bulk of this conversation felt like it was around purpose. That's just where I didn't intend it to land there, but that kind of just landed there, and it makes sense, right? In that process, in the things that you talk about, is it important for individuals to also be testing products and solutions along whether or not it's aligning with their purpose and achieving the impact too?
Yes, so part of what we say is you explore your potential. So it's exploring different fields. And so it's the same thing. It's really testing these different things, testing the different waters. So for me, if I have someone who says, oh, I'm in this industry and I want to get into nursing and I really feel like I have this passion to nurse. Well, if you want to be a nurse, a lot of times there's programs, and obviously this is a little bit pre-COVID, but where you can go inside the hospital and you can volunteer. And you can see, so part of that is how do you test that before you quit? Like you have a corporate job, before you quit your job, and you think like if you're not certain that it's what you want to do, then it's part of it is testing these different things to see what resonates. And so you may go inside there and say, actually, no, and it's the same thing. Like I wanted to be a doctor, then I realized I don't like blood or needles or.
Yeah, that was the same thing with me. Like I wanted to be a dentist, and I didn't figure out that I didn't want to be a dentist until after I got to the University of Michigan. And the only saving grace was that I had a fellowship, so it was already paid for. So I didn't have money, but that would have been a much harder decision if I would have spent all that money and figure that out later. Like, so it was kind of cool that I was able to test out my desire.
So
like
for both, it's test. It is that piece of like testing applies to both the entrepreneur and the individual.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And then, and I mean, and then, quite frankly, like not doing like kind of tied up with that purpose, the whole purpose and impact thing. It's like if you're not like one of the things that makes failing or being exposing yourself to failure and challenging your assumptions easier to swallow is if you look at it through a perspective of if I don't, the goal is to live out the purpose and to have an impact. And so if I'm not doing these things, if I'm not building the best product, if my product is supposed to help us get there, right? And if I'm not doing these things, then I'm actually doing a disservice to the people that I'm trying to impact, right? Or to the impact that I'm trying to have in my purpose statement. And so I think that's really cool. You can look at it from through that umbrella, right?
Yeah. And then I would just add on to that, like another one, and this is,
Is this your third one?
yes, this is my
Okay.
third one. So another one I would add would be, because a lot of times when we look at other businesses and we're looking at, and so one thing I would say is you're you're only competing with yourself in the sense of like, can you best your best when you're following your purpose, right? And so you're talking to your consumer, you're doing that work, but it's really, and a lot of the work in the competition is within you. But when you look at, because I always think that you should get inspiration from outside. When you look outside, I would say making sure that you're looking at adjacent industries, not just in your industry to see where your industry is going, but also looking at other industries. And I say this in my strategy role, I get a lot of inspiration from other industries that are doing things. And so that'll help you think about, well, hey, my industry, are there certain pieces of this that I can pull in? And I'll give an example with Moto because I know their business model a lot better. And so what they're looking to do is around social fashion. And so, but when you think about it, and so they can look at other fashion companies and things like that for inspiration. But I would also challenge them to look at, given their model of the fact that they have students that they want to empower, and they're also looking for entrepreneurs to work with as well. So it's kind of like this duality of their model and needing to scale both sides at the same time in order to be successful. So look at other companies who have done that, like Uber, right? Where they had to get drivers and they had to get writers at the same time, or Airbnb, where they had to get hosts and they had to get people to attend it, or looking at industries that are similar, like direct selling, where they're working on getting the person that's actually going to sell the product, but also the person that's going to buy the consumer. So I would say looking at finding different aspects of your business. And so what industries can I look at, and look at other companies that have successfully scaled in these adjacent industries, and what can I learn from that? So I think it's kind of like this always being a student.
Yeah.
And so I like to always be the student and look at different business models where there's some synergy with mine, and saying, hey, what can I take from their journey? And even the one before that I told you, it was after I read a business case about IBM. So when IBM first came out, they had this belief that people wouldn't want to write on keyboards. They thought instead that,
That people would not want to write on keyboards.
yeah, that keyboards wouldn't, like the consumer wouldn't want a keyboard. So instead they thought that people would want to talk and dictate instead of being on a keyboard. And so, but instead of going as far as to build computers that you could speak into, they were smart enough to test that concept. So what they did is they brought in a bunch of consumers and they tested it, and they didn't have a computer built that you could speak to. They weren't anywhere, like they didn't have that technology. So instead they had they had a microphone on the computer. The consumer didn't know this. And as you talked, there was someone in the next room that was typing, and it would show up on the computer. And so what they found out through that test is that people did not like typing. They didn't like the fact that you could hear them. They didn't have privacy. They said it made their throat hurt and all these different things. But had they not done that test, they would have invested in this product that at the time the consumer did not want.
That's interesting. I would have never thought, like you're right, there is a privacy component of that. Not to digress in this, but that's very interesting. Like I'm typing something, I don't want to say it out loud because I don't want the whole world to hear, right? So,
especially if you're thinking about business, because IBM wanted to be the business computer. So if you're thinking about business, and back in those days, we're thinking about investment bankers and money and trading and accounts,
right.
that probably was their core consumer. But I say all this to say that as you continue, and I know when it gets really busy. So as someone that works a full-time job and I have my own venture, I'm super busy and I'm a mother and all these other things, but it's also taking that time and I try to do at the beginning of the day to be a lifelong learner and look at these adjacencies to see what you can learn and to test. And so that's how I continue to refine it too, is through doing those things. So I would say, look at adjacent companies and industries and see what you can take, but also continuing to do that work and finding that time, because it is so valuable to get that time in that you may think doesn't benefit your business, but in the long run it will.
So what's cool about hearing you saying that is two things. One is like I like to build I'm fascinated by systems, and I was a biology major in college. And the reason why I was a biology major because I just like systems, right? I like to understand how they operate and how they move. And then people always say to me, did you use your biology degree? And I was like, well, no, because I do the work I do now, which is the furthest thing away from it. But the thing that biology taught me was how to look at systems, and I found inspiration, and I find inspiration in the way that those systems are set up, and I've used them in the way that I approach business, right? And I've oftentimes do that where I look at like just nature in itself or the things outside, which is completely unrelated. Or I can go to like something and I'll see how somebody does something. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. If I tweak it, I can do this, or I understand the importance of these things, why it connects, right? We just listened to a pitch about these investors, Ben and I, this is a few months ago, from these guys. One guy is a founder of Patagonia, or worked with the founder of Patagonia, but they started this fund where they got the inspiration for the fund by just on a nature walk and looking at how nature operates. And therefore, they constructed a fund where it was an ecosystem of companies that were dependent on each other and used each other's waste, right? And they helped each other out, and they got it, the inspiration based on being in nature. And then I was watching Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, who were obviously are probably the two greatest coaches in history, one in the professional ranks and one in college. And they're talking about how important it was to get outside of football, to look at, to become a lifelong learner, and to learn and to look at other things and have other experiences, because they found that it added so much richness to them being a better coach and building things, and they can see things in a different way or see something new. So being a lifelong learner is really cool. Well, let's, with that being said, let's open it up to the fellows in this last 15 minutes. Fellows, we talked about a lot here. We talked about purpose, passion, the importance of it, impact, the three lessons that Jennifer gave us around challenging your assumptions, not being afraid to fail, and being a lifelong learner. So anybody have questions that they would like to?
Yes, absolutely. So Jennifer, first of all, thank you very much for being a part of Rally and coming and talking to us. Really inspiring to get your insights and your background. I jotted some notes down. One of the things I really like that you said is don't be afraid to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. I love that because one of like kind of my life sayings is, if you're the smartest person in the room, you might be in the wrong room. So those are words that I live by. Yeah, and graduated near the bottom of both of my classes. So I'm living by my own advice there. But one of the things that I'm kind of struggling with, and I wanted to get your feedback on, is when it comes to problem framing and tying that to your purpose. One of the exercises we try to do here at Rally is to frame your purpose and your end state as something positive, which is particularly difficult for me individually and our company in particular, because we've built our purpose around fighting an evil that we don't know if we're going to eradicate it or not. We would like to, but the whole purpose is that for us is that human trafficking is opposed effectively. Right now, we believe it's being opposed very ineffectively, and that there's really, really great work being done in raising awareness and in connecting survivors and victims with services after they're rescued. But we believe the sophisticated organizations that are kind of doing this are not opposed effectively. And so our whole core is built around, okay, we're going to build a mousetrap, whatever that is, to fight those guys that are not worried about the current efforts that are combating human trafficking. So what's kind of your reaction to that in terms of building a problem or a purpose around fighting something that's bad, like human trafficking or hunger, for example?
I'd say for me, I think in that it's still there's still a way to frame that. So for me, I think if your purpose really is to combat that, but if you're looking to how do I frame that positively, then it's looking at, are you bringing awareness, like you were talking about, to the problem? Are you, even when you think about, a lot of times we use the word victim, like simply changing victim to survivor changes the message, right? And so some of it is around that, like, how can you see it? But I would say kind of getting beyond that, it's actually looking at your core groups too, right? So overall, you have this overarching purpose, right? But then also because you were talking about how do you convey that purpose, as you convey that purpose, I'm assuming with you have different constituents, right? So it could be, because you're not working directly with the survivors, if I remember correctly, but you're working with lawyers, and then you're working with the government.
Right.
And I'd say for the lawyers, they probably care a lot more about that purpose and bringing justice to that purpose. Whereas when you're working with law enforcement, it's probably more about efficiency and how you're going to make their life a little bit easier. So I'd say not being afraid to kind of tailor it to those different groups. But realistically, from my perspective, I think as you look at your problem statement, there's always a way to kind of switch a negative into a positive. But whether it's bring awareness or bringing the tools to be able to solve human trafficking, but at the end of the day, it is human trafficking. So that's just what it is. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great.
I want to double down on that real quick, but just quickly, because I like this question because it drives out the reason I think it's important to state your purpose in a positive. And the reason is because it's more accurate, I feel like, to what you're doing. So yes, you're opposing human trafficking networks, but why? Why is that evil or bad? It's evil or bad because what you said a few minutes ago was people ought not to be owned and sold, right? And so the base conviction for zero trafficking is people ought not to be bought and sold. The problem is we're attacking human trafficking networks in the wrong way, right? So zero trafficking is here to help lawyers and police agencies attack this evil of human trafficking in the right way, because people ought not to be bought and sold.
Yeah. Great point, Ben.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
then
getting back to the why versus
writing down.
the who and the what.
Yeah, I was going to say just what Ben is saying. And then it goes back to something that Jennifer was saying, that if you're explaining it in the way that Ben's saying, that people ought not to be bought and sold, and the reason why that's important, then it gives you opportunities down the road to position your technology maybe for other things that cause those people not to be able to live the life that they want, right? Because they're being bought or sold or controlled by someone or something as a result. And so it opens you up to different product things. And so it's like what she was saying, it's like not falling in love with necessarily the product, but understanding fully what the purpose is. And the question becomes, how do you build products and services, regardless of what they look like, to help solve that thing, right? To get people there, right? And I just thought that was really cool when I think back about what she was saying as it relates to that area.
It changes the conversation in a really powerful way, because people might disagree and say, well, people are not being bought and sold, they're just independent. And then we say, well, here's a network. These people are controlled because they're all part of this network. This isn't a co-op. This is a criminal organization.
Yeah.
Guyana, you had your hand up?
Yeah, you had your hand up.
Yes, Jennifer, thank you for this amazing, inspirational talk. And I'm really sorry I missed the beginning of the presentation. So my question, actually it's not a question, it's kind of advice. You are also an entrepreneur, and I'm sure many of us had that struggles even like emotional struggles when you feel that, oh my God, it's like the end, there is nothing and I cannot do anything. It doesn't matter. The struggles are in the team, outside of the team, with the customers, with the investors, or how to find an investors. Like, what are you doing? Just let's say, take a breath, calm down, and continue your way. Like, what's your advice? How to do, and what actions to take when you have that emotional or physical struggles?
Well, I would say absolutely right. I think all of us have that moment where we're wondering whether we can do it, whether we're qualified to do it. Is there someone that's better suited to do it? And so I'd say that's the natural piece of it. But I would say with part of that is I think it's, and it goes back to what I said before around kind of embracing a little bit of that failure, embracing the iteration. So failure is a part of your search for a business model, right? And then also understanding that progress is in many cases better than perfection. And I will say this, like in all of like me being a rally maker, a lot of times I've worked with people that they want to get the perfect model, perfect product, perfect everything. And that is the thing that's going to drive you crazy and is the thing that's going to like put you on edge because of the fact that like it's hard. And so a part of this is, and I'll talk about something we call like the MVP. So sometimes it's about getting out that minimal viable product, right? Instead of trying to create that perfect product and using it as a test. So you're not saying like, hey, this is what my product is going to be, but testing it and learning from that. So knowing that you don't have to come out and be 100% perfect. Part of that is the people around you. If you position it the right way and supporting that, we're testing, we're trying to understand, we're doing this to better understand what you need and what your needs are. And so in that process, when the consumer, you put something out there and the consumer is saying, no, it doesn't do this, this, and this, I would say seeing it not as a person, and it's hard when it's your baby because it really is like your child, and just like every parent thinks their child is wonderful and special. I certainly do. And so it's taking a step back and looking at what you can learn from that, I would say, on that piece. So I would say don't get so caught up in like any of the feedback or whatever. It's using it to serve you, but not in a way that it's putting you down or making you think that you can't do it, but using it to serve you. So what can I take from this feedback that's going to help me on this next iteration, that's going to help me move this forward? And then I would say on the personal side, I think it's about knowing, and so that's a little bit of deeper work, but I think part of it is having, knowing that everybody kind of deals with this same thing, this question of, am I qualified, am I not? So having something that you can go back to reflect on, like, yes, I'm qualified. And for me, that is having, for me, it's faith, and the other piece is friends. So I have people around me when I have those moments where I'm going crazy or I'm questioning, they can say, and so I have a team of advisors that can say, and they're different ones, business advisors, spiritual advisors, different types of advisors, but they can say and tell me and show me who I am sometimes when I don't remember who I am.
Yeah. So I want to just the two things that just back on my own personal experience. Like, I definitely agree with what Jennifer is saying in terms of that MVP and the feeling of how ugly it feels, because you, in your mind, you know what the ideal state is, or you believe that you know what it is. And I know how damaging that thought could be in terms of what, as she said, like, you're so obsessed with getting that, and it stops you from putting it out there, because if you put it out there, you may find that customers really don't want it the way you want it. You can save yourself a lot of time and money. And I've experienced that, where I've wasted a lot of time and money doing that. And then the other thing is the imposter syndrome. That's a real thing. I mean, I even have it to this day. Like, man, am I really, like, do people really buy into that? And so that's a real thing. I'm not sure exactly, and maybe Ben would know, but I'm not sure exactly like where exactly how that comes and why that surfaces and how to necessarily combat that. But I do some of the Jennifer aligns, and a lot of that, faith and family for myself is also a big thing. And then not discounting like my real experience, right? Like, The fact that like, yeah, like I understand this. I've been in business. I've talked to entrepreneurs. I've seen entrepreneurs grow. Like I've done these things. I've done it successfully. And yeah, maybe not $1 million, $1 billion company, but I've done these things. And even my failures have value, right, to people, because I could tell them what not to do. So no, that's a real thing, and that I think that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with at various times during their career.
Yeah, the thing I liked about it was like when I heard you say minimum viable product, one of the one of the most interesting conversations I feel like we have over and over again is when people actually have arrived at a minimum viable product. So to agree on when is the right time to go to market with something is you'll get a lot of different opinions on that. How much customer discovery you should do before you go with a solution, or when is the right time to start releasing it, when is too early. And I think that one of the most valuable things you said in that last part, Jennifer, was picking the right advisors. So one of the ways I navigate challenging situations is I decide ahead of time who I'm going to trust. Because if I'm only going off of my gut and listening to all sorts of people, I'll end up spinning around in circles, and that's when it produces anxiety and confusion. And so you need to go into a big decision with people that you can trust that are outside of yourself. And when it comes to, I don't know what to do, then you can look to this person and they're saying, well, let's go in this way together. And then you say, well, decided ahead of time I was going to trust them. And that can be in business, that can be in personal life. And so it goes back to the advisor committee she was talking about before. It goes to mentors. Have you decided that you're going to trust this mentor, or are they just a good sounding board or opinion person that you go back to the person that you actually trust? But you have to decide, who are you going to trust in a situation, and it'll make a lot of those decisions go better for the company and for you individually. Abdullah, did you have something? Maybe that's our last one.
Yes, I do. First of all, I want to say one thing I learned now of the Jennifer's talk is the adjacent companies, right?
That's cool, yeah.
I was very scared to even think that the concept I have is similar to Uber, Lyft, Amazon, eBay. But as I think about it, as Jennifer was talking, we are bringing both parties in, right? We have to deal with both the people who are going to buy the options and the people who are putting up the options, right? So if you guys have any books in mind regarding Uber, eBay, or Lyft or something, please suggest. I would love to read it and read their struggle, and maybe learn, and of course learn something from them. Secondly, I hear about this minimum, launching a product at minimal. What was the word?
Minimum viable product, yeah.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's why we've been delayed, because I'm not launching my product because it is not what it is. And because of that, we got into more competition last week. But it bothers me that I wonder if the social media and all easy communication portals that are out there, if I do put a product that didn't do right to some, wouldn't that word spread, and wouldn't my project die before it even takes off?
So I would say that like, yeah, that is the greatest fear. But for me, I'm saying more of testing the MVP. So because it all just depends. I think when you're talking about dealing with, because you're dealing with finances and nonprofits and things like that. So obviously your due diligence side has to be a lot more than maybe someone who's who's selling soaps or different things. It really just depends. So for you, I would say it's testing it. So maybe having an MVP and finding a few nonprofits or things like that that can test it with you and see how it works in our kind of like you're getting into the ground floor. I'm testing with you so they kind of understand what the intent is there. And then you can get all that valuable feedback from them for free as they help you test this. So I'd say that's one way that you can look at it for yourself.
I would say, Abdullah, like this is why the work of understanding your customer is important. right? Because if you don't understand what it is, the primary thing that you're supposed to be solving for them, if you don't understand at its core, you cannot build a product that gets there and delivers the value. And so you can't even come up with an MVP. You'll be searching for, you might deliver the wrong MVP that's delivering the wrong value. And so the MVP ultimately is a thing that, at least at its very core, in a very minimum way, but meaningful way, delivers that value very simply, right? All the other stuff, you know, we often use the example of QuickBooks. QuickBooks, their value proposition is I'm not exactly sure how to articulate it, but their value proposition is what it is. But at the very core of it, the way that they found to be able to express it in some incremental way, where business owners felt like, oh, this is it. It's just through the simple debit and credits, like keeping a balanced book online and be able to do that. Bring in my, you know, I'm gonna make your life simpler by allowing you to bring in your bank statements into a computer. You can click off and say, okay, these are this, and just do your checkbook simply. And then all those other things are things that they added on, but they had to get that first, the primary value. They had to get the value. They had to understand what value that they're going to deliver first. And so if you don't understand what that is, that's why the survey stuff matters. If you don't understand what that is, then you can't deliver MVP that gets you to where you need to go. So what
I would, I would add to that also, I think the MVP actually helps you to de-risk it if you do the things that Kyle was talking about. So then you kind of take out some of the risk in it versus like it increases it. So where we're thinking, hey, this can increase the odds that people don't like it and it ruins my reputation. But I think it's worse to not do kind of like that work and then put out a product based on what we think, or even and with all these bells and whistles like Kyle was talking about, and spend a lot of time on it and it misses the mark of what they wanted because that testing and that MVP and that customer kind of thought was done. So now not only do you like, there's a reputation piece there potentially, but also there's a lot of time and effort that is wasted as well. So I think it helps de-risk it in some regards too.
Yeah. Well, Jennifer, listen, this is great. Entrepreneurs, you know how to get at her. She's on Slack. But Jennifer, Ben and I really appreciate the fact that you spent this time with us today. Once again, you know, we're all about trying to showcase the awesome wealth of talent we have here in Orlando, because we're making a case that we should be a destination on every social entrepreneur's journey in this, and you helped us make that case today. So we appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you for having me. And yes, and if you guys need any help, have any questions, like he said, you know how to reach me. Thank you.